with that. Tonight we are starting in Leviticus chapter 15. Last week we went through the two of the really fun chapters. Tonight we are looking at another fun chapter. Then some interesting sections, so we'll see how far we get. Any questions before we hop into tonight's discussion? Yes.
What were those three questions? One, who does it protect? Two, or
How does this live into God's promise? So when we're talking about the law, he promised that we would not get disease, we would live long lives, women would not miscarry, and we would have everything that we need, our stuff wouldn't wear out. That was his promise, right? The second question is, who does this law protect? The first question, how does this show God's promise? Second law, who does this protect? And if we don't get the answer in those two, then the third question is, how does this show God's love? Okay? So, pragmatically speaking, most of the laws we've experienced in Exodus and Leviticus up to this point have been laws to help the people experience God's promise, right? Last week when it was about homes and clothes and stuff like that, it was so that their stuff wouldn't wear. When it was talking about the food laws, and many of those food laws were about so they wouldn't get diseases or so that their women wouldn't miscarry. Even when we talked last week about chapter 12 about the time after birth, that was about women's health. It was about making sure that everyone stayed healthy. So that's kind of where the law has been, isn't it? So tonight we're at 15 then. There's no other questions. Then my first paragraph is 1 through 12. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when any man has a discharge from his body, discharge is unclean. And this is the law of his uncleanness, or a discharge, whether his body runs with his discharge or his body is blocked up by his discharge. It is his uncleanness. Every bed on which the one with discharge lies shall be clean, and everything on which he sits shall be unclean. And anyone who touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. Whoever sits on anything on which the one with discharge has sat shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean. And whoever touches the body of the one with the discharge shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. And if the one with the discharge spits on someone who is clean, he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in the water and be unclean until the evening. And any saddle on which the one with the discharge rides shall be unclean. Whoever touches anything that was under him shall be unclean until the evening. Whoever carries such things shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. Anyone whom the one with the discharge touches without having rinsed his hands in water shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. And an earthenware vessel that the one with the discharge touches shall be broken, and every vessel of wood shall be rinsed in water.
You're using good water.
Laundry services would have been worth a lot.
Yeah.
In many ways, yes. Most of the treatments for discharges, illnesses, diseases were much the same. Makes me think of like what my grandmother, who was a school nurse, used to say when I was a kid. If most illnesses, you just gotta let it run its course. But stay away from people who aren't sick. Doesn't that kind of ring true? What else do you notice?
It only says man.
I'm pretty sure this is probably general mankind. When an individual. Okay, but if you want me to double check it, I can. Oh, there is that kind of discharge as well, yes. I don't know if it's that. In chapter 2, or verse 2, I mean? Okay. That's probably, when we get into some further paragraphs, that would probably be an accurate word to use, but I think this one's talking about bodily discharges in general. Later on, it will get into that specific.
Does this guy that's unclean or has a discharge, is he telling everybody that, hey, don't come close to me, don't touch me, don't run my mouth, don't? No, how do they do that? I mean, yes, we until evening.
I think it's still like, remember, this is still connected to what we talked about last week. So I'd say that there's still the quarantine hut. And I did learn something in talking to Daniel about last week and this week both. The quarantine hut was not a place of punishment. In fact, it was one of the most comfortable and well-stocked places in the camp, especially the women's quarantine. When they were on their monthly flow, that was something, it was one person's job to make sure that that place was cared for more than everywhere else. Now, that's not written in scripture, that's just, we know that from. So, probably when they're going out to the quarantine place, wherever that is, yeah, they may be saying, I'm unclean. Try to get out. But I think part of what this is, because this is building on what I was talking before, is if a person found out that they had unclean, and when they found out you had already sat on the chair that they had been sitting in, what do? Well, it's telling you're probably unclean, and go wash your clothes, and when you rise up in the morning, you're gonna be fine. So it's less of a punitive thing and more about saying you're going to be okay. Does that make sense?
So how about the people taking care of the quarantine huts? They'd be unclean all the time. People would be coming to them.
Yes. I think it was probably actually cared for by Levites. Because it was their job to say whether or not a person was clean. So just like you have a rotation of Levites who get to serve in the temple, alongside the priests, you have a rotation where they're at the gates, you have a rotation where they're the money keepers, you have a rotation where you're out with the unclean tent, quarantine tent. Very much, yes.
Was the quarantine tent in a certain place of the camp, or like at the edge of the camp? Or?
It'd be at the edge of the camp. It would be at least, what we read, it's probably a good 10, 15 feet beyond the edge of the camp, but it would probably also be in a spot closest to where, you'd have soldiers stationed. Because just because they have to be outside the camp, if the Levites are going out there, they're also going to have to, because they're going to be some of the most vulnerable. Again, that's not explicitly written in scripture, but we know that from tradition of how they would have set up the camp. And for the record, it had to have been a fairly large area, because remember, if we go back to the women's solution, there's over 3.5 million. How many of those are women? How many are dealing at a time? Probably a rather large and can't.
Any idea what the breakdown of the male, female back
It would have at least been 60-40 women. It could have, sometimes they say it was as much as 70-30 women. And died in battle. Women did. That's part of the reason why you so often see men with multiple wives. Otherwise, they become destitute. It's not necessarily, that's just the reality of the world at this point. I'm not speaking of the Jewish people, that's just across the board. It's only been relatively recent in human history that we've gotten to, what is it? It's about 52% women worldwide now, something like that. It's 248, 51, 49%, somewhere there. But that's a relatively new phenomenon. Any other thoughts or questions? Anybody at all curious as to why wood is okay if it's washed, but earthenware is not? Clay pots are a different kind of things. Actually, did extra research. The wood would soak in the water and expel the disease. Anything that wasn't water, because trees are naturally designed to flow water through their system. But the clay pots, it wouldn't, air forces would just hold on it. Anything else? That's why they're great. Yep. Nothing else, then the next paragraph is 13 through 15. And when one with a discharge is cleansed of his discharge, then he shall count for himself 7 days for his cleansing, and wash his clothes, and he shall bathe his body in fresh water, and shall be clean. And on the 8th day he shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, and come before the Lord to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and give them to the priest. And the priest shall use them, one for the sin offering, and the other for the burnt. And the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. Questions, thoughts? It's that again, that waiting period, make sure that it's completely gone. It's also the reality of 7 is their completeness. So after you've been quarantined and everything's clean, you know, after a week, if it hasn't come back, you're good. And then therefore, on the 8th day, you're good. Others? And just a reminder, I really don't know that sin is the correct translation of the word for this instance. It's separation. They have been separated from the body, now they're being reunited. And so they offer, one as a sinner separation offering, the other as a whole burnt offering, saying, God, make sure that this sticks. But notice, it doesn't matter how wealthy or unwealthy you are, everyone for this just brings the 2 things. Any other questions, or keep going? (16 through 18) then. If a man has an emission of semen, he shall bathe his whole body in the water and be clean until the evening. Every garment and every skin on which the semen comes shall be washed with water and be unclean until the evening. Man lies with a woman and has an emission of semen both both of them shall bathe themselves in water and be unclean till evening. Keep on the shelf.
Pretty strict.
Okay. 19 to 24. As a discharge of her body with blood, she shall be in her menstrual impurity for 7 days. Whoever touches her shall be unclean till the evening. Everything on which she lies during her menstrual impurity shall be unclean. Everything also on which she sits shall be unclean. And whoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in the water and be unclean until the evening. And whoever touches anything on which she sits shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in the water and be unclean. Whether it is in the bed or anything on which she sits, when he touches it, he shall be unclean until evening. If any man lies with her and her menstrual impurity comes upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and every bed on which he lies shall be unclean. Thoughts?
They took care of the house and the goods and the home for all. Frustrating.
It'd have to be the men, or if they had maidservants, ladies in waiting. Of course, I'm not sure how that would work, because they've done lots of studies about a bunch of women in one household, they tend to sync up, so. It'd be the men.
It's multi-generational house, so that's it for everybody, just.
It very well could be, because it was multi-generational, they were talking about clan houses, clan tents. They'd probably be the women who are beyond. And then with the help of them.
Sounds like a woman would be best off just finding one seat and stay there till it's done.
You've got 3.5 million people in tents in the desert, there's gonna be no secrets. We think it travels fast through social media today. I'm surprised none of the ladies have caught on this. Any of you noticed it? Who's it saying so far is in charge of cleaning up? It always uses the masculine pronoun. When he washes, when he cleans up. Sorry guys, we're not exempt from cleaning or doing water. That was years ago. That's Any other thoughts? Then realistically, especially for the women, they're in a compound outside of the rest of the community, and it'd just be a bunch of ladies out there getting.
I remember, quite a bit of already.
The red tent was a absolutely true phenomenon. And like I said before, it was one of the nicest places in the community.
Yeah, a bunch of women lived there, so you know it's clean.
Kind of like spa water.
I think how many it'd be, if 60%, at least 60% women. There's over 3 million people, that's 1.5 million, or almost 2 million.
So even if you take a third of them out because they're not of the right age, there still could be as many as 1 million women in that once a month. It would not be a small red tent.
Person, when the women are pregnant, that's 10 months that they didn't have to go out there.
Okay, so we'll cut it down to maybe half of that. Because we did say that when they're pregnant and then for the next 6 to 12 weeks, they can't get pregnant again. So even, you're still dealing with 500,000. Give or take 50,000 women at any point in time might be in the.
Like 12 by 12.
Not a 12 by 12. Probably not a single tent. Probably for that many people, you'd have every bit of Decatur in red tents.
For really that big of a population area that you're talking about.
Well, at the time that this is written down, remember, they're still in the wilderness. They've just come out of Egypt. And as we did the math, it could be 3.5 million people. And all together, huddled together in the middle of nowhere.
So were they always carrying their water because they always would have a stream or? Or would they? I mean, they'd be traveling from one place to the next, but where would their water come from?
That's why water was so important. They would carry as much as they could, they would use it while they could, but they would often keep moving even through the night until they got to the next water.
So it's gonna ask how long did they stay in spots?
Probably until the water was no longer clean and it needed time to.
It'd be a job just to move the red tent.
Cause you wouldn't move, right?
Very different meanings of red and white. Any other thoughts? Let's see how much further we can dig this hole, 25 through 30. If a woman has a discharge of blood from the days not at the time, he has a discharge beyond the time of the, all the days of the discharge, she shall continue in uncleanness, as in the days of her impurity. She shall be unclean. Every bed on which she lies, all the days of her discharge, shall be to her as the bed of her impurity. And everything on which she sits shall be unclean, as in the uncleanness of her impurity. Whoever touches these things shall be unclean, shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in the water, and be unclean until the evening. But if she is cleansed from her discharge, she shall count herself 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. And on the 8th day she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, and bring them to the priest, to the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest shall use one for the sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering. The priest shall make atonement for her before the Lord for her unclean discharge. Just another scenario, different verse.
One thing is, how many pitches?
That's
That's a lot of pitches.
Last quad.
How do you get it? How do you?
Well, they probably have cages, they,
They'd probably be raising them just like any other animal.
probably have a million. Times 2, that's a lot of doves.
It'd be about 12 million doves a year just for this.
That's right, look at this.
Like I said, the thing was an 8 foot by 8 foot thing that was basically going 24 hours a day. The other? I want to, before we move into the next section, I want us to remember a story back in Genesis. Remember when Jacob decided it was time to leave, and he took Leah and Rachel and Bilhah and all the kids, and they left. And Rachel took the household gods, the land deeds for their land, and she put them underneath the saddle and then sat on it. Remember what occurred? She said she was on her period. was her time of the month. You'll forgive me if I don't get up. Even if she had gotten up, because she was sitting on a saddle, with that underneath, the guys were not gonna touch the saddle. They'd search everywhere else in the tent, but they weren't gonna touch her, and they weren't gonna touch what she was sitting on. Because this was moderately the cultural practice, whereas God standardizes it at this point. But do you see how she manipulated the situation? Because for many places, it wasn't the 7 days that you have to wait. Who knows how within the culture. You touch someone who was having, you might be unclean for a month, 2 months. Depending on what your community is there.
It means all literally they had civil rights.
Yeah, there's the numbers thing, there's the fact that, you know, that for at least 7 days a month, 7 out of 25% of the time, you just could not.
I know that's not kind of that, but I'm just saying, if you said other cultures might be able to do that. How do they have children? All kind of.
Thus, the story again, going back to Jacob with Leah and Rachel and the other two women, how they're fighting. It's my week. I want to have a baby, it's my week. Probably the guy who wouldn't know, he'd just come home and it's like, okay, where am I going? I'm not saying it to be crass, I'm saying there's literally the reality of you don't know how to play your cards. That's the reason I said, anybody who marries more than one woman is just a moron. Any other thoughts? 31. Thus you shall keep the people of Israel separate from their uncleanness, lest they die in their uncleanness by defiling the tabernacle that is in their midst. Any thoughts? Questions?
You know that happened.
Right? Finish the chapter then? 32. This is a law for him who has discharge, and for him who has emission of semen becoming unclean thereby. Also for her who is unwell with her menstrual period, that is for anyone, male or female, who has a discharge, for the man who lies with a woman who is. This chapter be put back up on the shelf. Are we done with it? Let's move on to nicer things. 16, the Day of Atonement. My first paragraph is 1 through 5. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, when they grew near before the Lord had died. And the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron your brother not to come at any time into the veil before the mercy seat that is on the ark, so that he may not die. For I will appear in the cloud over the mercy seat. But in this way Aaron shall come into the holy place, a bull from the herd for a sin offering, and a ram for a burden. He shall put on the holy linen coat, and shall have the linen undergarments on his body. He shall tie the linen sash around his waist, and wear the linen turban. These are the holy garments. He shall bathe his body in water, and then put them on. And he shall take from the congregation of the people of Israel 2 male goats for a sin offering, and 1 ram for a burnt offering. So putting this back into context, this is going back to whenever Nadab and Abihu, his sons, were in their 7-day period of purification, getting ready to be ordained, and they decided, no, we're just gonna go ahead and do it. And they went into not just into the tabernacle, but into the Holy of Holies and the holy place, and defamed it, and they were struck dead. So realistically, we are still within 7 days of the tabernacle first being dedicated. With all of this. The other side of this, one of the things that happens on the Day of Atonement, I'm not sure if we're going to get into this specific, but the high priest's job on the Day of Atonement wasn't just to bring in the blood and to read, anoint everything, but their job was to literally make sure everything was important, clean everything. So God is saying, don't come in regularly to clean this, just come in once a year, so that you don't end up doing something stupid. Does that make sense? Now, the other part of that is, we don't know how often they move the tent, right? We don't know how long they stayed in any one place. In the book of Numbers, if you read through that, it'll say that they were here for a little while, gone, and then, so there's a sense in which it's always going to be cleaned as they move. But going in for the regular cleansing, purification, making sure everything is right, God's saying you don't need to do this regularly. Just handle it once a year on the Day of Atonement. It's not just about making sure that everybody is right with God, it's making sure that everything in God's presence is made right. That makes sense? Because otherwise, you really want to be the housekeeper. Have that, right? Any other thoughts or questions on these first couple of versions? Six through 10. Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. Then he shall take the 2 goats and set them before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Aaron shall cast lots over the 2 goats, one lot for the Lord, and the other lot for Azazel. And Aaron shall present the goat on which the lot fell for the Lord, and use it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement over it. It may be sent away into the wilderness to pass.
Mine said that's the scapegoat.
Yes. What other questions? According to tradition, Azazel was a demon or an evil spirit whose job it was to punish the guilty. So by taking all of the sin of the people and putting it on one goat, and then offering the other as a sacrifice, taking the scapegoat, sending it out to the wilderness, where supposedly Azazel resided, they were taking all the sins of the people, sending it out to the punisher so that no one can. Whether there's actually a demon or evil spirit that's job was to punish sinners, I don't know. God's not going to reveal that to me. One of the priests, their job was take it out in the camp, probably smack it on the rear, send it off to the one. Any other thoughts or questions? But we can also now understand, as you said, many translations call this the scapegoat. And a scapegoat has, we use that terminology all the time, but someone who's pretty much innocent, but we put all the guilt on them and they take it and they just have to do it. Any other thoughts? You guys being really quiet. 11 through 14. Aaron shall present the bull as a sin offering for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall kill the bull as a sin offering for himself. He shall take a censer full of coals of fire from the altar, and 2 handfuls of sweet incense, beaten small, and he shall bring it inside the room. Put the incense on the fire before the cloud of the incense may cover the mercy seat that is over the testimony, so that he does not die. He shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the front of the mercy seat and on the east side. In front of the mercy seat, he shall sprinkle some of the blood with the finger 7 times. Thoughts, questions? Pretty specific. Remember what the incense is for? Right? Incense was meant to represent the prayers of people going up before God. So if Aaron's putting incense on the incense burner before he goes into the Holy of Holies, and it's supposed to be enough smoke, incense smoke, that it fills the room, what do you think the imagery is to be conveying to Aaron as he goes to do this? It's both the cloud, but it's also this reminder that he's in the presence of God, but he's bringing with him all the thoughts and prayers of the people. But this is not just him entering in, but it is the collective spirit of all the people. Any other thoughts?
I have a little footnote, said the smoke of the incense covered the ark, so that the high priest could not see the glorious presence of God and thus die.
Yeah, that could be. I don't, I'm not sure that that's the only reason, but enough instances in there that smoke of that representing the prayers intermixes with smoke that represents the presence of God. Yeah. Okay, I'll go there. Okay,
I didn't write it.
but I had to talk it out as I was thinking it through. But that's as plausible of a reason as any others. You going? 15 through 9. Then he shall kill the goat of the sin offering that is for the people, and bring its blood inside the veil, and do with its blood as he did with the blood of the bull, sprinkling it over the mercy seat and in front of the mercy seat. Thus he shall make atonement for the holy place because of the uncleanness of the people of Israel, and because of their transgressions, all their sins, and so he shall do for the tent of meeting, which dwells with them in the midst of their uncleanness. No one may be in the tent of meeting from the time he enters to make the atonement in the holy place until he comes out and has made atonement for himself and for his house and for all the assembly of Israel. Then he shall go out to the altar that is before the Lord and make atonement for it, and shall take some of the blood of the bull and some of the blood of the goat, and put it on the horns of the altar all around. He shall sprinkle some of the blood on it with his finger 7 times and cleanse it, consecrate it for the uncleanness of people. No thoughts or questions. I'm guessing that since we've been going through this, now you're starting to understand what's going on. The symbolism. It's no longer, I mean, it's still off. Let's compared to our culture today, our world, this is just off. But we've seen now why they did it. We've seen the symbolism of why God told them to do it. And so therefore, by the time you get here, once you understand the other parts of this, it's lost some of its strangeness.
Doesn't it seem like they're trying to, the future?
No, there's no divination in this. There's no attempt to predict the future. They're simply acknowledging that they are a people who are unclean in front of a holy God. And so they periodically are being reminded once a year that the blood is life, and their life is in the hands of God. And realistically, they don't deserve to live because they are unclean, sinful people. But God says, come to me anyway. He gives them this process for making themselves worthy to be in God's presence, even though they're really not worthy of themselves, and even though realistically the death of the animal isn't what pays the price, it's what God says is happening by their act of faith that allows them to be made right with God. It says, you guess. The same thing is true for us as Christians, right? We say because of the blood of Christ, we are made right with God. Because of Christ's sacrifice. That is what God requires for the rest of humanity to be made right with Him. One life, one completely innocent life, one sinless life becomes the atonement. In this instance, for the Day of Atonement, one life, the bull, is meant to cleanse Aaron and his household. And the goat that's brought is for the atonement of the rest of the community. So just in general, they have a once a year. We're making sure this is that addendum, like anybody in the job description where it says and duties to be discerned later kind of thing. The Day of Atonement was, and for sins that may never be found out. Make sense? Go. 22. And when he had made an end of atonement for the holy place, the tent of meeting, and the altar, he shall present the live goat, and Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat, and confess over it all the iniquities of the people of Israel, and all their transgressions, all their sins. And he shall put them on the head of the goat, and send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a man who is in readiness. The goat shall bear all their iniquities on itself to a remote area, and he shall let the goat go free in the wilderness.
When you're reading this, I'm like, Santa Claus, making a list and remembering all the things that are bad and all the things. Puts it on the goat, but as that priest, I don't know how you remember all of the sins of the people. If he hasn't said it.
My guess is he does it the way that I asked for prayers on Sunday. For all those who are sick and hospitalized, for all those who are dealing with grief, for all those who've dealt with tragedy in their life, oh, and for anything else, right? Sometimes I throw in some other categories for the leaders of our community. You know, if there's something very specific, I might throw that in. I'm certain that the high priest is like, for all the liars, cheaters, no good, dirty scoundrels, and everything else they've done. Otherwise, if it's like Catholic confession and the high priest has all of that, it's gonna take a bit to retranscribe all of that back onto the new. Unless they just wrote it down as it went down the rapture comes. Go.
He tells the person, just go out, you do it, and it's you say.
I think it's more of that symbolic. I don't think he actually confesses all the sins. That would be my guess. Because what do we say about God? He already knows. So it's not about saying this as if God doesn't know. We gotta bring God up to speed, right? He already knows, so they're putting all of it there. And it's a very symbolic way of telling all the people in the congregation, these sins are not here anymore. They've been atoned for and they've been sent away. Sense?
You like, then this, my sins forgiven.
Does that sound at all familiar? As Christians, do we have to do anything other than just accept it?
Forgiveness.
Well, I mean, at some point in time, they brought their sacrifices and they did their part. And at this is symbolically getting rid of all of it. You know, yes, our part is to bring our sacrifices, to acknowledge our guilt, to acknowledge our struggles, to acknowledge our faults. But the reality is, outside of just acknowledging it, and for them bringing the sacrifice is painful. It's done. It's done. And if you don't know about it, then once a year, there's a sin offering you take. There's, on the Day of Atonement, everything else is covered. Your sin ledger is wiped clean at least once a year. So long as you put your faith and trust in God. Thus, again, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, right? It's just now, instead of us bringing the sacrifice, God has brought the sacrifice in Christ. But it was more, even back then, it was more about putting your faith in God than it was about the act of bringing the sacrifice, right? Because if it was about bringing the sacrifice, then they would write, these sins have to be dealt with a cow, these sins can be dealt with a ram, these sins can be dealt with a goat, these ones are pigeons, and these ones are doves. But it's not based on this. It's based on what is a sacrifice for you? What would actually be something of value to you?
Which is why the widow gave 2 coins. Made a bigger sacrifice than the person who
Yes.
gave that.
Exactly. God is not about your relative wealth. It's about your willingness to give to Him. It's about your willingness to trust God with what you've got. She gave everything she had. The other guy gave a lot more money, just in the raw ledger balance, but it wasn't anything. For some people, those 2 pigeons is a lot to give. For some, the single cow is done. Then Aaron shall come into the tent of meeting and shall take off the linen garments that he put on when he went into the holy place, he shall leave them there. He shall bathe his body in water in the holy place, and put on his garments, and come out and offer his burnt offering and the burnt offering of the people, and make atonement for himself and for the people. And the fat of the sin offering he shall burn on the altar. He who lets the goat go to Azazel shall wash his clothes, and bathe his body in water, and afterwards he may come into the camp. And the bull for the sin offering, the goat for the sin offering, whose blood was brought in to make atonement in the holy place, shall be carried outside the camp. Their skin and their flesh and their dung shall be burned up with fire. And he who burns them shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterwards he may come into the camp. So even if you drew the short lot, and it's your job to take the scapegoat out, make sure it goes into the wilderness and it's gone. You just gotta wash your clothes and wash your body and come back in. Same thing as Aaron, who went into the Holy of Holies, same thing as the person who had to take the entire sacrifice and burn it all outside the camp. We might call it a short straw, but God treats them all. What you thinking, Chris? See your wheels turning.
Well, okay, 3.5 million people. It's my job to go outside the camp. And I'm on the far west side and on the far east side. That's quite a walk to do it.
Very well would be, yes. How long is it gonna take you to walk across Indianapolis?
Wow, couple of days.
Indianapolis doesn't quite have 3.5 million, but you're not dealing with all the businesses and industry and everything else. I'd say you're probably talking about a camp the size of a 465 vortex. So yes, it would take, but the tabernacle is in the center of it. So the farthest you're gonna have to walk is half.
Just
Still a good trek. If you're walking, and you can walk 4 miles an hour if you're walking at a decent pace, then it'd still be a 5-hour trek from the center tabernacle all the way out.
And my luck, yes, not there.
And that burn pile is probably on the opposite side of town from the red tent area.
Yeah,
When you start thinking about the sheer volume of people that we're talking, even if you go with an extremely conservative estimate, we're still talking about 1.5 million. That's a lot of people. They're not hiding in the desert. You can hide 1 or 2 people in the desert. Maybe a family, maybe the group of us, we could potentially hide in the desert. 1.5 to 3.5 million ain't hiding in the desert.
So with the burn piles and all the discarded carcasses from the burnt offerings, have they found any of these during like the excavation processes and stuff? Have they found any of that stuff? I guess bones don't deteriorate. I mean, we still have dinosaur bones, so I mean.
They still deteriorate, they just don't deteriorate at the same level of everything else. It still takes a long time.
But I mean, like the pots and clay, I mean, they found them in the cities and underneath everything, but have they like done anything out in the desert to try and?
Well, first of all, I'm assuming that since there were still actually lions and bears and jackals, probably a lot of it, once they finally moved out. Once we moved from in the Indy area to the Fort Wayne area, then all the scavenger animals try and find what they can find. But you would think that we would find something, except that it has been almost 3,500 years since they were moving around in the desert. By the same token, remember that just because for the Jewish people, these practices were clean and unclean, doesn't mean that the community around them would have thought the same. They might have went and taken all those bones and wanted to make knives and stuff out of it. Who knows what they might have used those
Shame.
Any other thoughts or questions? I know that in cities, they have found a lot of, or former cities, they have found garbage dumps that have a lot of this kind of stuff in. Broken pottery, you know, and carcasses and things like that.
I couldn't buy sugar.
Yeah.
Let's finish the chapter. 29 through 30. And it shall be a statute to you forever that in the 7th month, 10th day of the month, you shall afflict yourself and shall do no work, either the native or the stranger who sojourns among you. For on this day shall atonement be made for you to cleanse you. You shall be clean before the Lord from all your sins. It is a Sabbath of solemn rest to you, and you shall afflict yourself. It is a statute forever. And the priest who is atoned and consecrated as priest in his father's place shall make atonement, wearing the holy linen garments. He shall make atonement for the holy sanctuary. He shall make atonement for the tent of meeting and for the altar. And he shall make atonement for the priests and all the people of the assembly. And this shall be a statute forever for you, that atonement may be made for the people of Israel once in the year because of all their sins. Aaron did as the Lord commanded Moses.
And the Jewish calendar, what is the 10th day of the 7th month?
This year it was September 24th. Sunday, September 24th, Monday, September 20th.
What did you call it?
Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement.
Mine says the early autumn.
It was typically at the beginning of the Feast of Tabernacles. I think it was the beginning of the end.
You said the Feast of Tabernacles?
Let me check. I think it was. So Yom Kippur would happen, Day of Atonement, and then a couple of days later, they would have the Feast of Tabernacles, why we had our camping. They would do the Day of Atonement, and the last of the harvest had been collected. So everybody was done with their work, so they could come together, could be together for this Day of Atonement where everybody's sins would be dealt with, and then they would spend 7 days apart, eating festivals, feasts, but they do it in tents. So, you know,
Unless you were dirty.
unless you're dirty, then you had to be out. So you want to make sure that you were not dirty, so you participate in these festivals. Any questions about chapter 6?
That's it.
Not as bad as 15, no. Okay, well, hop into 17. My first paragraph is 1 through 7.
If I may say something,
Sure.
my chapters have titles on them. This one's called Prohibitions Against Eating Blood.
Yes.
That does come later in the chapter. Mine actually says the place of sacrifice, and then before verse 10, it says laws against eating blood. So,
When it's the appointed place, when we're in the name. And then we take it easy.
so. All right, we'll do 1 through 7. And we'll just go and do 1 through 9. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and his sons, and to all the people of Israel, and say, this is the thing that the Lord has commanded. If anyone of the house of Israel kills an ox, or lamb, or goat in the camp, or kills it outside the camp, and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to offer it as a gift to the Lord in front of the tabernacle of the Lord, blood guilt shall be imputed to that man. He has shed blood, and the man shall be cut off from among his people. This is to the end that the people of Israel may bring their sacrifices that they sacrifice in the open. They may bring them to the Lord, to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and sacrifice them as sacrifices of peace offering to the Lord. And the priest shall throw the blood on the altar of the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and burn the fat for pleasing aroma to the Lord. So they shall no more sacrifice of sacrifices to goat demons after whom they order. This shall be a statute forever for them throughout their generations. And you shall say to them, any one of the house of Israel or of the strangers who sojourn among them, who offers a burnt offering or sacrifice, does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to offer it to the Lord, that man shall be cut off from his. What do you think?
Very good.
The one thing that I want to draw attention to is understand that every time they ate meat, whether you went hunting out in the, amongst the wild, or you brought one of your animals from the flocks or herds, when an animal was killed, it had to be acknowledged before God. I remember a couple weeks ago, whenever you were so concerned about how all these animals were being killed, right? Can you imagine how much different it'd be if every time we wanted to eat meat, we had to acknowledge that that animal's life was being given? If nothing else, by taking that animal's life, it's a peace offering that God has blessed us. How different do you think things would be? Change those things just a little bit? Because I remember in particular, you were just appalled. Certain animals were dedicated just for sacrifice. The other animals that they were allowed to eat, when they killed an animal, they still needed to bring it to the priest and acknowledge that they had taken a life, and that life belonged to God. Which is again why I say they pretty much only ate meat when they went to tabernacle. They went to church.
Yeah, they would be throwing birds on the.
Nope.
They consider fish.
Fish, they could eat pretty much any time. It's kind of hard to find fish. This is also why I believe that by the time the Jewish people encountered chicken and turkey, they were allowed to consider that not sacrificial animals, and so but they were still clean, even though I question chickens across the board, just period. If you've ever raised chickens, but
Yeah.
but
You think not eating your foot meat, why do they have to be so?
so their primary diet would be fruits, nuts, vegetables, bread, cheese, and wine, pretty much. And that's it. They would eat that all the time. I mean, if you guys have been here for our Monday, Thursday meal, I could eat that most of my life and be perfectly fine. I also would be very happy to have a party every Sunday. But this is a very different way of life. Can you imagine how different it would be for us if we genuinely took stock every time that we ate meat, that God, you created this creature, it was yours, now it's sustaining you. And to see that even the act of preparing the food is an act of worship.
I guess I was thinking, that's comparison is great.
That's one of the biggest reasons why we do every time we eat. Many Christians pray. It's an acknowledgement that what we are taking in really is a gift of God. I mean, whether you work a job where you make money and you trade your money for the goods, whether you are a farmer or a herdsman and you raise the animal or the crops that you did, it's irrelevant. The fact that God has given you the help, the ability to with all that work, I see like people would become vegans. Well, at least once a week, you come to the tabernacle and have you a good steak. It would also probably be more of a treat if you only experienced it while you're in the presence of God. Not saying that eating meat is a treat, you get what I'm saying. It would have a different significance.
No, well, steak is treated.
There have been a couple times where I've had a really good steak, and I was, in my heart of hearts, I was on the verge of worship. Okay, God, this is phenomenal. Any other thoughts or questions about the verse? 9 verses. 10 through 12 then. If any one of the house of Israel or of the strangers who sojourn among them eats any blood, I will set my face against that person who eats blood and will cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in me. I have given it for you on the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement by the law. Therefore I have said to the people of Israel, no person among you shall eat blood, neither shall any stranger who sojourns among you. At this point, I want to remind you that there was a practice, and actually this practice still existed in some more remote areas, still happens in Africa, that there is this notion that if you can consume the blood of another creature, that by taking in its life, you are taking in its power. And so God is saying you don't get your power from taking it from someone else. You get your power because you are in relationship to.
So if we had raw steak. And you were,
No, there's a difference. Let me be very clear, because since raw steak was brought up. Almost no steak can be purchased today without blood. They're going to drain pretty much all the blood completely out of the animal before they ever start dissecting it in custody. Whenever a steak is cooked, what you see coming out of it is not blood. It's juices from the meat being cooked. Yes, some of it is red, but it is not blood. Same thing. I can't remember what the name of those meat juices are, but it is not blood. About the only way that you're going to consume blood is if you are around when the animal is being butchered and you capture the blood for yourself.
Something.
That's not what it is. Well, and depending on where you're at, the red stuff may just be food. Just saying, I mean, that way it looks like it's fresher than what it actually is. This prohibition against eating blood really was about God saying, find your strength, find your life, find all that you are in me. Don't go looking to other things to do it. Don't go look thinking that you can take it from other people, take it from other creatures. At this point in time in human history, they have proven that there were a lot of people who believed that if you drank the blood of your fellow enemy, that you would take their strength into you. We call that cannibalism today, but that was a belief. And that's the primary thing that this is talking. Finish the chapter. Anyone also of the people of Israel or of the strangers who sojourn among them, who takes in hunting any beast or bird that may be eaten shall pour out its blood and cover it with clean. For the life of every creature is its blood. Its blood is its life. Therefore I have said to the people of Israel, you shall not eat the blood of any creature, for the life of every creature is its blood. Whoever eats it shall be cut off, and every person who eats what dies of itself, or what is torn by beasts, whether he is a native or sojourner, shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, be unclean until evening, then he shall be clean. But if he does not wash them or bathe his flesh, he shall bear his iniquity. Thoughts? You know what? I think I'm going to stop 14 minutes early. Have fun next, Susan. Unless you guys really think we can get into 18 and 14 minutes. Yeah. That's the one I'm saying. Final thoughts. When you start really paying attention to this practice, you understand that God is not really violent. God is trying to preserve. God is not against us eating meat, but God is saying if we're going to eat meat, let's be serious about what you're doing, because you're taking the life of another creature that was made by God. It's not wrong, we just should have the right attitude when we do. Should be one of thanksgiving, as God provides. Any other thoughts?
I go to Jesus, but it always compares the Old Testament to the parts and that it was this particular law about not taking blood that caused problems for the Jewish people when Jesus said, it's my blood. And my body.
So think about that for just a little bit. If God says, don't drink, and then Jesus is saying, drink, what's going on? Take my power, my goodness, my holiness, my righteousness, everything that I am, take it into yourself. Because I'm giving my life up as a sacrifice, taking your sin, your guilt, your shame. And yeah, it was a problem for the Jewish people because of this, but they couldn't see what Jesus was trying to tell them. He was saying, I am the sacrifice. I am the scapegoat. I am the sin offering. I am the peace offering. I am the holy offering where you seek God's face. Well, yes, it was absolutely a stumbling block to many Jewish people who just couldn't get over it. If Jesus really was a good Jew, and if this really was God, God would not say, drink my blood. Any other thoughts? Many do. Blood sausage does not appeal to me at all.
A lot of it, but never had. My neighbor used to make it when I was a kid.
I know. No, thank you.
Neither.
This is one area where I think kosher is fine. Although I like bacon, every so often I really want a good pork chop. And man, we eat a lot of seafood. Shrimp, shrimp and crab are cheaper than meat. Meat. No other thoughts? Let's go to words first. Heavenly Father, we thank you that we do live in a day where you have given us the gift of yourself. Where you've paid the price for our sins, where you've made atonement for us. Lord, we pray that you would help us to have that attitude of worship and thankfulness every time that we eat. And Lord, may we take seriously this call to live holy lives so that we might be priests to the nations. So that when the world looks at us, they see you. Be with us as we seek to live lives that honor you. In Jesus' name.